This week, they realize they don't know what to do. So what they simply stone him to death and bury him.
If they will be doing that,
yeah, but the problem they have is there's no more law and order. There's no law. There's no law and order. Law and order have broken down in Imo State to the point where individuals are so afraid to go. It's a disaster.
I know. Just imagine our predicaments as
it's a mess. And it's not going to change. With Atiku coming to power, it's going to be a mess. But I think he's still a Fulani.
Hello and welcome everyone for coming. Thank you for coming to the book launch of Uzinaumu in Nigeria, History, Culture, Chronicles, and Recollections by Anyikam, a man that I've known for a very long time. I'm proud to call my father. Again, we want to take some time out just again to thank you all for coming to the event. We want to share some conversations here about the book, about the writing process, about the history and the culture that we all share collectively. And one thing that I found out pretty soon about reading this book was that this is a book true about one's particular village in one particular city in one particular state in Nigeria, but so much of the culture that's shared in this book relates to all Igbos from all the way from Ebonyi State to Delta, Abia, everywhere. There's a lot of overlap in the things that join us and make us Igbos to begin with. So even if some of the practices and cultures and traditions in this book don't directly relate to something that is from other cultures, there are a lot of parallels and things that we can draw from that and things that we can learn. Again, another thing that is exciting about this book is that growing up as a first generation Nigerian living in America, culture is something that is learned organically. It's not necessarily taught directly, and without having that community, the same community that my parents grew up with, finding that culture, we have to rely on reference material. We have to rely on books and things like that. And Nigerian immigration to this country is not very new, so those things didn't exist. Africans as a whole, not just Nigerians and West Africans, we typically pass on traditional orally. So there's not too many references that are actually written. And I think that this is what makes this book so special. And I think that we want to dive into some of that today. So before we start the event, I do want to start things as we always start with an opening prayer. And I will ask so I will. We'll start with the opening prayer again. I do want to also remind us that, again, if at any point in time you need to go and refresh yourself, feel free to just quietly go, and we have some fruits, some meat pie, chin chin, and things, and drinks as well too of that nature also. So, 1 second. Yeah, will you do the honors of leading us in an opening prayer? I couldn't find you a second ago. Amen.
Hallelujah. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we glorify your name. We bow down before you. Our Father in heaven, we glorify your name, and we bow down before you. Our Father and our God, in the name of your Son Jesus Christ, we have come to bless your name. We have come to give you glory and praise for making a day like this to happen, for causing your hand to strengthen your Son, our Father, to be able to work on this book. Thank you for blessing us with soundness of body and mind, that we can come together just to celebrate the presentation of this wonderful book. We pray your power will rest upon us collectively and individually. We pray at the end of this, your name shall be praised. We give you praise for upholding him and keeping him up to this age, that he can give back to the community by contributing into the culture, the richness of the culture of our people. Father, we pray that your hand will continue to keep him, and more stories will spring forth from this material. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. We pray that your hand will assist us together to see the future he has created for us, because he believes deeply that many people will build on what has been laid out now. Father, I pray that stories in the future will make reference to this book, and all glory and praise will be given to you. Thank you, everlasting Father. We lift up those who are on their way coming unto you, and those of us here, let your hand shield us. Let your mighty hand defend us, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. At the end of it, let your name be praised. For we have prayed in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now we will start, as we start all of our traditional gatherings, with the breaking of the covenant.
Every ceremony starts with a kind of sharing of good news, of good behavior. I'll call on Bulu. I give you the indulgence to handle this. Okay, thank you.
So Anyikam, I thank God for your life and the opportunity to be present here. You are doing us proud. As no one with Roger with Rando. So Anyikam for our father, or Anyikam, or a founding member of our Nigerian community, especially here around the southwestern side of Houston, and particularly our church community, starting from St. Albert to our Igbo Catholic Center that we are presently doing this occasion. Obohomu abonye okenye bonye no eba. Aga m asị ka nkene gị maka ibunye m ọjà, mana achọrọ m ile m nwere onye bụ onye kenye ka m nọrọ ebe a, ma ọ bụ onye chiri echichi, anyị ga-asị ya nyere anyị aka gọzie ọjà. Na nke a bụ nke anyị na-eme n'Igbo, anyị bụ ndị Igbo, anyị nwere usoro anyị ga-eme ya. Ọjà anaghị anụ Igbo. N'akụkụ m ebe a bụ my successor as the current president of the Nigerian Catholic community at St. Albert, where I was a founding president, and Anyikam was also a president of that community. But I'm going to yield to our current president and ask his indulgence to help me with this cola. Ka anyị si eme na be anyị, ọjị na-eje ije. Ọjị nwere usoro eji awa ya n'ala Igbo. Ọga Anyikam gosiri m ọjị a. Ana m achọ ka m buga ya president anyị, Ochedo, brother Nwachukwu. Ịmago ka a na-esi eme ya, ọ dị ka ọjị a, ọ gacha ije, ọ nachie, to onye isi anyị nọ ya bụ okenye kacha anyị nọrọ ebe a. I yield to you.
Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Thank you very much, my brother. Now, like my brother said, originate Jesus. Currently, I'm one of the current president of our ministry, whom your daddy, made it exist today. They are the people that got me interested in that ministry. Yeah, back I know today. So because when is the good, Ojia Murakada no make. So because not to forget. I believe oh, okay. Not you know Jack on the ditch as to Emosibia. But come Miss Ribbon or here. Red cow. You brought up in your mind. Then, Miss Ribbon said to me, "Where was your eye on you? Because they can never know." Anyikam, all you're all right. Yeah, because I am with Audrey. Thank you. Oh, Miss Ribbon, yeah, I sing it to walk in on that.
But like when you put in her room, I never late, or I can get if the group so desires.
Oh, Miss Ribbon,
Yes.
I greet you.
Thank you, sir.
Come on.
Hallelujah.
Yes. So because now, we told you with that.
He said,
Anyikam, I'm glad you. I'm very tired of. Yes. I got told you
Amen.
that I'm sick.
He said,
That you don't know that you don't know that.
he said,
He hides my care where we are. But we have to get
he said,
one night we get the region. You are Jojo. Men can do it when I start for research. Men never, men no more. Which of that automatic to share with us now. Now you're going to make 12 hours today. Almost Uncle, but you know, goes matter today. Because this our why they are here today. Only here can have a new that. But you will get me. Because I know I told you at that time. 9 in and they come in about a fan and then can rap on. So why went on? You want my car, you want kind of malo. Malaka is here. I will find that in Naka. One night, I'm okay. I'm not surprised. I'm more than the way born. I keep doing it. I want to walk. I am a bomb of your torch and I keep it and I came at time over. I go with torch. Then I mess with a kind of member today. You are no finesse in as you know, in each and each. Defend the kind of snack Christian.
Amen.
Ochendo na Igbo, because ochendo ndo gino.
Okay. One because Patrick, you cannot watch it. I would agent 1 and 2.
Ochendo
Because can they go for make our legal advisor at St. Albert, not the entire St. Albert. When when he tells us to go, we go. So because he's here and he's recognized. But how about you?
Exactly.
Because, yes, thank you very much. Nah. Yes. I am an. Oh, that's good. That's good. Good to know. And he's also married to the elder sister of our women president, our women leader, my co-leader. So he's Ogazu. Thank you. Oh, you see, can you imagine? You can. Yes. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. All right.
So just so that you know, if you don't have a copy of the book, if you have a copy of the book, you can read along. We'll be going through some passages. If you need a copy of the book, there's a station back there for you to acquire one as well too. We accept all forms of payment: Zelle, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Google Pay, not Apple Pay, or even just a credit card. So great.
Do we have to take this score? Nobody trace?
Yeah.
Check. Check.
So at this time, I'll send to my father to give a couple of brief words about what this book is about and why he decided to write it.
I start by thanking all of you for coming. It is a pleasure to see you here, to share with us or share with me the experience in terms of the book. And the book contains a lot of information that covers not only the Igbo land but beyond the Nigeria, because basically the information we hear can be very valuable to people. Somebody asked me, why do you write a book of your own community, but at the same time invite people outside the community? Number one thing is that experience. I found out that many communities don't even have what they can call a book that gives a historical antecedents of their existence, of them that predated like 1900. Some of them can't even remember what happened about 1940s, and we depended on single narrative. Single narrative is just what one person tells you without verification from other people. This book is just a book that is written based on intensive, steady research that based on information that the 70 people who were 70s and 80s and 90s were interviewed in mid 1940s and up to 1950s and up to 1960s and up to this time. And it's updated up to 2021. So it's something that has a long history that you can find very, very interesting. Okay? This book can cover a lot of things. It covers question is, how does the community originate? If somebody asks you how does your own village or your town or your community originate, and one of the things that simple as schools, when did the first school in your place, when was it established? Then ask you, who was the first person to be registered in the school? Those are some basic things that you may think that they're not very important, but they're essential and they're very important. Because this is how to start knowing about your community. Look at it. Remember, the community did not start only after the Lugar in 1914. Your town had been in existence long before that. And because people have no recorded history, because the people living that time, our ancestors, our grandfathers, our fathers, they don't have resources we had. Now we have resources in terms of the manpower, in terms of knowledge, in terms of experience. And, but no, we don't have a recorded history. So if our parents and who never had the opportunity we have, they never had the resources we have, they didn't even put everything they have in writing. They can only record a number of things. Why should we hand this type of thing to our descendants? So we are going to look at various things that make this book very, very important. We're going to look in terms of how the name you answer today how did your parents give you that name, and what does the name mean? And what about the name that you adopted yourself? So we're going to look at a number of things and look at the type of red cap. You can see my young man here in a red cap. The book will tell you who qualified for red cap. And then after that, the Igbo feather. Because Igbo feather, who qualified for Igbo feather? The number 1 and number 2. At what age do you have that? So you can look at it in terms of water chip system. Because water chip system, you see, is just a new institution, because it was used for tax collecting. So we're going to look at all those things. And then when you look at the totality of this, you find that this book will give you a lot of enrichment, empower you to know a number of things, and then you can pass this into your kids, and then you can build on that. So if you don't have that type of write-up in your place, with knowledge you have, you can start, and that will make a lot of difference. And that is the much I can tell you, but we're going to go into nitty-gritty with time. Thank you.
Thank you. Many of you all, in addition to listening to that as well, too, many of you all may see me tapping away on this phone here, and it's because what we're doing right now is that we also have raffle going on. So we have some select prizes and things for people coming out here, just to show some appreciation and break up some of the talking that we're doing as well too. So if you are at the table on this side or at the book table, there's a QR code you can scan, enter your information, you enter into the raffle that we'll be doing periodically through the event. But what I do want to do is I want to jump right into the book, and we're going to talk about oral history and preservation. In the remarks my dad made and the remarks that I made earlier, we talked about how these historical narratives are very rare and that they're passed on orally. So we see that on page 33 of the book. On page 33 you say, without a doubt, this publication will, beyond expectation, expose many historical landmines, which will certainly ruffle some feathers and make those questionable. Based on these compelling chronicles, and then you go on further to discuss those historical landmines. What do you say to critics about this, about the, who might say that they question some of the timelines or accuracies of the things that are reported in this book, because most of the people that you cited in your prologue have since passed. What do you say about that?
Okay, that's a very good question. The question that anybody who read this thing can ask for clarification if it does not even know the details behind that. In the history of a place, there are a number of things that you have to note. They passed through the age of when might was right, when people do things with impunity, when leaders or people of great mind can impose their wills on people, where exploitation is just unlimited, where there was no rules and regulations, where people can even make laws and impose it on people. So those are the things that have characterized the past. And if somebody has to go and dig into those, to use it and use it against the descendants of the people, I mean, it will be very unjustified, because people have lived that time. The people at that time never knew what they were doing was wrong, in terms of kidnapping people, in terms of killing people, in terms of so many other things. They never knew that it was wrong, because they found it that was their usual thing to do. But you cannot hold the descendants responsible for that. And as a result, most of those extremities, those injustices that have been characterized in so many things, in the days where might was right, where people could do anything, when there was impunity, then you cannot use them against the descendants. And that is one of those things that we look at, the landmines, that if you begin to dig them out and impose it on the people, it may not even be something that will be very good for the population.
So what can you also say about the ties that our ancestors, the people that, the narrators of this book, what can you also say about their spirituality and their ties to the truth?
Yeah. One thing that was very clear, very, very characteristic of this, the elders, because the elders who were interviewed in this book were in their 80s and some of the 90s, but majority were in the 70s. They were very, very transparent, very, very honest. That was the age when people will look at you and tell you something and believe strongly on that, and they believe that what they're telling you is the truth. Some of them are spiritual, this is spiritualists. Spiritualists in the sense that they believe that whatever they do will have drastic consequences if they openly lie or behave in such a way that was inconsistent with their belief. These people will, in telling you, narrating this, and they will just pull out the offer is just the staff, tomato, and they begin to tell you, this is what I saw myself, or this is what my father told me, or this is what my grandfather told me, or this is just the historical antecedent of the community. And if for any reason he knowingly lied, he said the offer will just kill him. So in other words, very transparent. It's just the guiding principle of people behaving in such a way that was consistent with their belief was one of those things that made a lot of difference. So they strongly believe in that, and that helped them to guide them to be honest. And one thing I want to let you know that this study was really study that started in mid-1940s. Okay, it started with my late brother who died during 1968, who put all those things up to the time. But in 1954, so I got involved in that. Don't ask me how old am I, because I got involved in that because I started it when I was young. And we continue getting all this information until, I can tell you that I started school in 1950. That was the time I started my elementary school. I can tell you exactly what happened in the same first day of class. And then from there to Queen Elizabeth coming to Nigeria, to independence, to other things. In 1968, he died. I continued collecting this thing because I was giving all this information to 1970s. And somewhere down the line, I said, what am I collecting this thing for? If I cannot even impart it to people, write it down for people to know. Because if I die today, those things will disappear. And the people who were interviewed that time were people who were in their 80s. If you were 80 in 1940, for example, you were born in 1860. You can tell something from 1860 to 200 to 1900 to 200, to up to 1940s. It's just they have a wealth of knowledge based on the experience, what they saw, and it can tell you a lot of things. So I said, okay, I have to put this around. Then I extended the study even to update it with the contemporary people, even younger people who were my age and who were younger than me, because there are certain things they knew that I asked them about.
Let's pause right there.
So those are the things.
We will have a small section for question and answering after each section. So there's likely going to be a lot of questions, and we encourage that spirited debate and conversation. But I will ask that you can just hold those questions and get a chance to write them when it's time to ask the questions. But I do want to expand on one thing that you said earlier, which was, can you all hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Live stream.
Here's the thing, because it's in my mouth in order for it to work.
We can hear you very well.
Yeah, Mike. Oh, there we go. Fire. Oh, it's on. There we go. Better? I'll just hold this. 1, 2. There we go. Okay. So we talked about the spirituality of the ancestors, the incentive to tell the truth, uninhibited by anything political, because the consequences in their eyes are drastic, right? But it's important to know that the collection of stories that you got, this isn't your testament. This is your reporting of the elders. So you're relaying that information as a messenger and not the person who wrote the message. When we talk about that, if you look on page 37, you write, speaking of the narrators, the ones that were interviewed for this, they further reported that when he was 62 years old in 1942, two remarkable events of historical proportion took place. The first was when Frederick Lugard amalgamated southern and northern protectorates and named this amalgam Nigeria. When he was sarcastically asked, in what country were those born before 1914? And this section, even though it's kind of a sarcastic remark, it brings up a lot of good questions. It reminds us of how it's very common in Western worlds to walk on a land that is inhabited by indigents for hundreds, sometimes even thousands of years, and call it their own, and say that they found it or discovered it. So when he says, what country were you a part of before 1914, it brings into question the source of tradition, the source of our culture, and when these things happen. So my question is, if we can comment on the complexities of those traditions, when does tradition start? Who are the people that push it forward? And when does it get passed on and left behind? In short, what makes tradition tradition, and how does it begin?
Well, thank you very much for the question. When the question was asked sarcastically, what country were you before 1914? It gives us an impression that, wow, it gives you essentially tells you that the community and all the communities in Nigeria pre-existed in that period. And somebody believing that 1914 was just when Nigeria started. It was the time they branded Nigeria, gave it name Nigeria. But the area had been there for centuries. Even pre-existed before the white people control. So the culture itself is evolution of people's way of life. And that evolution of people's way of life has, you can't even say this is where it started. But people who promote it are the elders, who really follow the trend of the people up before them. So it also tells us that even that area or that town or that village or that country, so-called country, had been in existence long. And discovering it gives people impression that maybe that is the time it existed, not westernization of it. But the truth is that it had been there long before that. And the people who really pioneered it and promoted it and tried to advance it are the elders. And the elders are people who have survived after so many obstacles and who survived so many trials and tribulations to promote it. So it's the elders that make up the culture, they protect the culture, and they promote it.
And as we talk about culture, right, this book, if anything else, is just a documentation of a lot of cultural practices. You even talked about the Alpha staff. I want to talk about some of the traditional practices covered in this book and dive a little bit further into it. So when in page 94, in the middle of page 94, under the section line of succession, you write, in the pre-colonial era, Uzinaumu lived in 3 autonomous enclaves, Ogabineme, Ekereme, and Ubakyam. Each autonomous enclave was made up of different kindreds. Each kindred was composed of some families, and each family was headed by the oldest living male who, through natural selection, inherited the alfa, or mantle of authority, from his predecessors. Is this mantle of authority as a form of a line of succession? Is this something that we still see practiced today in Igbo?
The answer is yes. Because in any family, large or small, they have the head of the family. And the head of the family is the custodian of tradition. And the Ofo becomes a symbol of that tradition. Even though nowadays we don't talk of Ofo, but in a symbolic way, the head of any family is the custodian of Ofo, and he is the person who handles most of the things. So today it is a land association rests on the head of the oldest male in the family, and he is the head of the family who controls a number of things, and the succession is still the same. Even though that Western education and Western culture, that's of religion, has watered it down somehow, that it is not as powerful as it used to be, where people have a lot of reverence to the Ofo. But Ofo is simple as a mantle inherited by lineage, by natural selection, is still a symbol of authority to any head of the family. And it is him whom, no matter how big you are, no matter how small, you have to respect him, because nature has selected it to be a head of their family. And it is common in almost every family. And that is the idea behind it.
Thank you. Now, one of the things that is covered in your book is a very large stretch of time. We go back from as early as the 1400s up onto just the previous to modern day Igbo land. Now, when we talk about that, this is still a respected part of the culture. We're coming to the realization that our culture and our diaspora is growing. Now, do you feel that the staff itself is still viewed by the diaspora as strongly as it is to those indigents in Nigeria, as that line of succession, or is the staff symbolic and that line of succession is still viewed as important, central to Igbo culture in the diaspora?
In the diaspora, there is a kind of admixture of various dialectic and ethnic, dialectic and cultural group, because there's a variation in culture within the Igbo land. It's not something that is just perfectly one thing. It's not very hard in terms of looking at that in the context of the people in diaspora. The people in diaspora is not a monolithic society. They are made up of different people with different perceptions. And then religion has come into a play that has just watered down most of the cultures. Even in Nigeria, even in the area of study, it has watered down very much. You can hardly see a head of a family going to use that staff as a means of paying a kind of reference to his own ancestors, because the church has overtaken that. So it is very difficult to see how you can replicate it, that original of form and the succession in the diaspora, because of the diversity of the people in the diaspora. So it may not even work very much in it. But at the same time, if you look at when the brother Wachuku Patrick was trying to kind of give a reference in terms of curriculum breaking, he recognized a number of people. He recognized some people. He knows who is the oldest and who is the youngest. And then that is a culture. Even the color itself, if you look at it, the culture is it reminds you, because in the past, the color will make you know who is who. Who is the senior, who is the junior, who is the in-law, who is this and that. By that, but we don't want to go into that ceremony very much, because this is a time where time is money. But in the original way back then, people will just know, you go line by line and know who is who. So that you don't step on the toe of somebody. If you step on the toe of somebody who is just ahead of you, maybe your mother is from his family, you cannot even do a certain thing without his permission. Those are the things, those are the things that tradition has.
So when we talk about that watering down, or that dilution of the culture, we go on further to talk about on page 95, just on the next page. It says records attest that, towards the bottom, it says records attest that open insurrection was rare at the time, because Uzinaumu was portrayed as a constituent of a classless society where people lived in harmony and with humanity and nature. They emphasized that conflicts of interest were rare, and if arose, it would be impartially resolved through swearing an oath. On the next page, you go further to say, however, the most important prerequisite for any member of the jury was that the citizen must have a highly exalted moral compass. And in this section, you talk a lot about just conflict resolution and the court systems and things of that nature. But what the question was that this practice of community courts and jury, is it still practiced today? And do you think that this era, this current modern era we have, is composed highly of citizens with that high moral compass to be the ones to sit on that type of jury tribunal?
In spite of everything that happens, our people always recognize what is a practical cultural heritage. Things that really people get committed because they find out it is right. In issue like where somebody has a problem, in prehistoric time and even in historic time. You can always challenge any person who sues you to a negotiator, an arbiter, or a mediator whom you feel is very dishonest. You have obligation, you have the right to say, I'm not going to go to this place to take this case or present this case for mediation because that person who is there is corrupt. You can give him 20 naira and he sees white, he says white, black. Because he doesn't have the moral compass, to give him the kind of thing that will make him stand. He doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. His right is when you give him something, and his wrong is when you don't give him. So, and that is one of those things that happens in those days, that you have an obligation to reject any person you sued before, that sued before you, to somebody you feel is corrupt. And you have an obligation to say, okay, this guy is good, he's very fair, you're going to look at it. And if you try it, somebody is very, very dishonest, not only that you condemn the people around you, say, look at this person, don't send your case to this person because you can't get justice. And that is how selection was made. Differentiate who is honest, who is not, we will handle the case. And somebody who has been very honest and been handling this thing can have so many cases brought to him. And then it evolved into making him somebody a judge. Because he can handle things just honestly and fairly.
Thank you. We'll take one more question before a short break. I want to move over to page 201, kind of the middle of the first paragraph there. When we talk about these judicial systems and these traditional judicial systems, this part on this page highlights an important event during the section of Uzinaumu. And I want to read from there. It says, Mr. and Mrs. Uzinaumu were outraged and told the women that they had no right to seize their valued properties. At that time, the women failed to heed their own concern and finally left with those seized items. Because of that forceful search and seizure, Uzoma and his wife went to the Olu District Magistrate Court and filed a suit against those women, alleging that a group of women invaded his home and forcibly searched, seized, and carried away many valuable properties, estimated to cost hundreds of pounds without their permission. A little further down it says, that became an unforgettable eye-opener and the end of a legal search and seizure in Uzinaumu and Nudi. Now, I think this is important because we spent a good amount of time in the book talking about the political and the societal structure, conflict resolution, judicial systems. But we have an incident here where there's a traditional practice that was interrupted by the introduction of a Western court. So how does this speak to the strength of our cultural traditions, or lack thereof, in light of their potentially being challenged by the introduction of a westernized court system, which doesn't take those things into consideration?
Okay. One thing you have to, I want you to observe now is that if you look into those issues and look inwardly into your own community, you can see that this mirrors a number of typical things in your community, even though this is not written for your community. Why I'm saying this is that in terms of decision, who will handle your case, when you don't have an institution that you just designed and elected and imposed on you, where people have the right to decide based on their judgment, their fairness and the anticipated fairness. For you to understand this, let me give you a small background. Traditionally, when a woman is married, the bride lives with the husband And the community, the women in that community married from, the kindred, will give 3 years for the bride's mother to come and bring a number of things that can help the daughter to live a life. It could be pot, it could be a mortar, it could be some petty thing, all those type of things. Give them 3 years. If after these 3 years, nothing is done, the community where that woman is married will come to the woman and the husband and impose a fine. They call it unzu, that you are escorting, giving a dismissal, you are giving a kind of property to that person to start life. And they have a defined fine that is very, very, very small fine, but it's just symbolic for you to pay. If they come and you talk to them in a nice way and give them something and this and that, they can postpone that to about a year or two. But this case, this lady called Gay, I know this was in 1954. Okay? Gay was the wife to Uzinaumu, and they married after 3 years. They didn't do anything. So this woman, the women in the community came there. In a group like that, some women would be very, very aggressive, some of them would fight, some of them would do so. They came there with force. And, the husband and wife did not even cooperate with them because they are noted in the community as very troublesome maker. Okay. They jumped in and seized a lot of things. They seized those things. Remember that was the time. We have only, because the court, magistrate court was in Olu, and we about 18 miles away. So what they did, this guy did this, and I don't know what gave him, because the guy lived in Cameroon and Calabar for some time. I don't know how he came about that, but it's always somebody you cannot even mess with. The right is that if they seize your property, they take it as a collateral for you to come and pay that fine, and then negotiate and find the time you can pay that. But this didn't happen. They came there and said, this guy said, forget it, I'm going to deal with you. He went to a low magistrate court and got police. That was the time. You don't talk about bicycle. They have to walk step by step to a move. And then, when reaching there, they gave them a place. And they walked down from there to the town. And surrounded those women, there were 12. And they took them, paraded them like that, it's just not in the place where they paraded them like that, both the police and they walked from there to home. It was a historic thing. So when they reached there, this guy charged them. They came to his bed, invaded his place and seized this without their permission. That is seizing without permission. No warrant. So it was a test case. A test case that challenged the traditional means of law enforcement and the contemporary constitutional or the statutes. So they tried that. After some time, just a very fast trial. This is not like the Kikibila. They just within under 1 month, they found the woman guilty. And they put them in jail for 1 year. 4 of them, 8 of them were just fine and they would go to them, because those ones who were leading were the people who were in jail, put in jail. One drastic thing that happened, that one woman who was one of the people who were in jail had a nursing baby. In spite of every plea, the magistrate that time was a white man. He said he has to go in. She went into jail with that baby and lasted until 8 months, because if you have, based on what they said, if you are in prison for 1 year to 12 months, after 8 months, your lawyers, I don't know, after 8, it served 8 months, and they came back. what does that thing do? It means that when there is conflict between the traditional law, custom, and tradition with the government thing, that the traditional will give step down. What again did it do? It completely destroyed that type of enforcement. That Igbo died a natural death. Not only in this town, this village or town, but throughout the whole within and even environment. And nobody ever talks about that again. And that is problem there is that is the test case that if you are getting to like you settle a case like what I'm talking about, the mediation and negotiation and all that thing, the two parties will accept your judgment because before you become relevant. If not, somebody can say, forget it, I can go ahead and do what I want to do. And that is the very main thing that happened in that.
So, thank you. Let's take a quick break. I know we had some people with some questions. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll come by with a microphone and you can speak. There's also a raffle that's going on in the back as well too. So if you have picked up your book, you can scan the QR code, put your information in. We have some good raffle prizes as well too. Also, there are some small chops as well too if anyone's hungry. But we'll take some questions before we move on to the next session. Is there anyone with a question who wants to add, or even a comment or a story to share? Oh, there we go.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Umar. I'm impressed and also baffled. It seems you covered a long area, a long range of history from 1400 to present. And I'm looking at the book here. I know your research seems to have been from interviews because you didn't reference other books. Because personally, I feel that it cannot cover Igbo culture, Igbo tradition, without referencing somebody like Achebe. This stories, tradition is what he wrote about in his book. So how did you get the research covering other authors that have written about Igbo tradition? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question. What a distinction you have to make between the research we're talking about and the oral narrative of a community is that this is the first of its kind. Besides that, the more than 10 people, 10 old people, oral narrative is a relay of what happened in the past. More than 10 old people in 1940s, 46, 1950s were interviewed. And the basic thing, the question now that the method used is what you call participant observation method. A part of the book I will tell you because a case study. It will tell you that a guy who was 8 years in 1940 was born in 1852. Chebe was nowhere at that time. And he is not person of the Igbo culture. The idea is just Uzinaumu. But it's just, most of the things discussed in this can be reflected in different culture, different areas. But the participant observation is where these 80 people or 90 people live in a community, know what will happen in the community, saw it from the time they were 8 years to the time they were about 80 years. So based on that information, they relate this to people. And the study was designed in such a way that these more than 10 people were presented a question about the origin of the town, about the way the government was carried out, about so many other things that are very, very relevant in this study. And they were separately asked questions. That is the reason, because this idea is in the book, but it's not even a part of this. It's not even questioned. Each of them were asking questions about the origin, the way of life, the financial system, the red cap, so many other things. And they each answered questions separately. And the questions were about 13 questions, really. They will ask this question, they answered it individually, and it was probably documented. And then the number one question, if answered by 10 people separately, were only put together and say, look, this question number one, these 10 people answered it, put it separate and look at them. He asked number two question, the same thing. He get answers from all these 10 people, and then he put it together. Then number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 8, based on the things you want to research on.
So is it true that you're saying that?
Okay. One question for clarity. So is it true that you're saying that the difference between this and a lot of the other academic books that you're saying is that, first of all, this is specifically about the village that there essentially is no academic work on. And then 2, this is a recount from those narrators as opposed to the more, I guess, traditional way that that celebrated authors like Achebe have written their own books.
Yeah, because the best of Ofunogoro and Achebe and other people are contemporary things. You know, this study is just a prehistoric time of the community. And there's something that even before that, the people who lived the life, who lived within that time were telling their personal experience. I think it was an observation they see. For example, if somebody who is just 80 years, born 1942, he can tell you that in 1950, that he started school. He can tell you what happened. If he can tell you from 1960 to this time, the experience in and other things is more evident that is very authentic, unless he has something to hide or something to add. So if you have about 10 people telling you about the same length of time, then you make sense of that, because this is not something that you have. Now, I meant references of some contemporary things where they are relevant. But the relevance in this is because of who lived that life and stayed there and knew what happened and related and has left. And that is what history is about. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, sir.
Any other questions?
No, I wanted to ask you what to say.
All the way up.
Is it on?
All the way up.
Yeah.
There it goes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anyikam, I'm so impressed because you've taken us back to basics, writing a book about the history of your own people is something that all of us should be able to do from time to time. My dear brother here asked a very academic question regarding the references you put in the book. Apparently, I have not so far seen where you made quotations here and reference some people so that such references can be incorporated in this place. This is live population usage of people who lived the life of the story and telling us here. And it makes a lot of sense. I look at it like in those days, especially the case study where some people's properties were seized and they had to go to court and justice was obtained, unlike now, where they seize your things and they go and share with whoever is going to be the judge and you are gone. It's good for children to actually read this and see how our parents lived their lives. And that's part of the reasons they even live longer. So, thank you very much for this book. And it's given a lot of us thoughtful things to worry about, how we can actually also let our children know these things. Because I usually ask a lot of people, when we talk about proverbs, we say, oh, my father said this, my grandfather said this. When are our children going to be saying what we said? I don't know. It bothers me. So it's necessary that we begin to really look at history, especially culturally related history, so that we can keep up living as a group. A story of this nature, I like it. It makes me know more about what Mudi people and the very particular village or town you referenced, the things they did that are relevant to what my people did. And I can see a lot of things in common. So, good job. You are not wasting your retirement time. God bless you.
I want to comment on one of the things the fine gentleman there said. Take another question. The floor is yours.
Oh. They want to, because they want to attend to very late. Anytime I apologize, please. I really apologize coming late. On America. And let me say a few things. Many of you know him very well. Very, very well. Many of you know him very, very well. Alex was my classmate as an Augustine Library. I thought he wrote a book on the Nigerian Biafra War. Really. I thought that would be the nature of his book. But I also know he was a historian, right from St. Augustine. I knew that. I knew one day he would rise up to write a book like this. I'm not surprised. I'm astonished and also happy. Alex, congratulations. You have done so well. I will read the book very, very well. You know, we did it. And I also make my comment directly to you. As a historian, I also know that Alex was prepared for this type of obligation and performance. He was prepared. And the school we went to also prepared him for such a task. You know, Alex was a brilliant student when we were there. As I said earlier, I thought he was going to write a book on Nigerian Biafra War and the part he played. But I'm sure somewhere in your retirement, you might have the time to scribble on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more. We'll take one more. Take one more.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cornelius Chukwemeka Warren. As Anyikam, I really thank you for the time you took to research and do the groundwork in writing this book. Writing a book is not easy. I remember trying to do that a long time ago. I did that, but it was not published. And there are a lot of factors that make a literary work publishable. Some of the things you did in trying to bring materials together in order to write this book, we appreciate sincerely. It's not easy to gather people around the village and interview them, especially the elderly ones. Sometimes they even do not put certain things in the proper perspective as per chronological time. The one thing that I really want to ask about this book, since it deals with the Igbo culture and the Igbo people as a race or as a group as a people. When I left home, Nigeria, and I found myself in Eastern Europe, I was so impressed and surprised at that matter. In fact, to discover a small book by Mopugo Koye in a very unexpected place, in a public library called Lenin's Library in St. Petersburg, Russia. And that book was what captivated me the most, and it surprised me that while I was looking at the places where I thought I would find the answer to the question, I found some answers in a very unexpected place. The one question that I want you to help me understand, and a lot of scholars have written about that, is about the origin of the Igbo people. From the gatherings you have made, all the studies, I know you're a scholar in government or in political science. Help me to understand, what is your perspective about the origin of the Igbo people? The biblical connection we have with God and all that, and the narrative that we have that says that the Igbo people come from Ingri and all that, as per the culture that you are trying to portray, or you portray in this book. I want you to see a way of marrying the culture you're trying to explain with the narrative that we already know that is already in the system circulating about the culture and the origin of the Igbo people. Thank you.
A very fine question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and I thank the people who spoke before that. Emma, thank you very much, because I think you knew me more than many people here. Because that's the person, if you want to know who I am, you ask him, he knows. Your question is right, but let me give you one thing. On page 48 of the book, you will read about Mbedi Kingdom in Ogo. That is a part of Mbedi that moved down to Ogo. And if you go to online and you enter Mbedi Kingdom of Ogo, you see the relationship between Mbedi in Imo State, where they come from, and the Mbedi you know. So that is one of them. But in terms of origin of Igbo, there are a lot of write-ups. That is, honestly, I can't tell you that that is my area. It doesn't depend on, but if I want to work on that, I can still work on that. But it's not something I can tell you that it comes from this and that. There are a lot of divergent publications. Some of them are myths, some of them are religions in terms of the Igbo, because people put so many things into politics and do so many other things into it. But I cannot for sure tell you authoritatively that I can tell you where they come. But I have what people wrote about that, what people said, and how they validate what they said, and those things are the things that researchers should always buckle up and delve into it and probably solve that problem that is not solved up to this time. Just like any other thing, because let me tell you this. I was in the West in 1960s. The history of Nigeria, of Africa was not even existent. There was a man called Father Galvin of the University of Ibadan. He was a history instructor of the University of Ibadan. He delved into writing history of Africa, but believe me, it's just half of this book. Oyo Empire was written on one page, just one page. Canon Bonu was written on one page. The Zulu were written on one page. Igbos were written on one page. There were absolutely no material. So from that time, they were giving the impression that Africa just started when the white men came, which is not true. So those are the areas, but today, I give you an example again. The Yoruba people, one of the things they wrote that Orion and Kakamfo, they descended from heaven. That there was a ladder that came from heaven and the man descended and found Yoruba land. So those are the things, but those things have passed. But a lot of things are written now. There are more research now. Even going to the archive in Britain, going to so many other European countries, found so many things that we are hiding. Because anything that was good in Africa in those years, they said from either the Asians or the Arabs or the Europeans. So that is something that people should look into, because there are a lot of people who are interested in that. And they are going to find that maybe with time. And they are going to find it where they don't expect it, because it is in that archive they can dig into it, the depository, and find it, and those things will prove. But when you have something like that, through those their own archives, then they have nowhere to hide. They just accept it. That is exactly what happened.
That question is a very popular question. And through a lot of deep dives, a lot of authors and scholars have done, I've read a lot on that question as well too. I probably have my own theories as well. But there are some deep dives we want to really get into here as well too. We'll take one more, and I want to make sure we cover a lot of the things we need to cover here. So we'll take one more. There will be time for other questions, or we can even throw back to some of these other conversations we had as well too. We'll take one more for the gentleman on the side of the room. Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Emmanuel from here. Anyikam did a marvelous work. I wished before coming in here that I had gone through this talk, then I would have had much to say. I know in part of it, you referenced the opera and the kindred. I am one of them, the diaspora. I became an opera on the 9th of January this year. You did mention, I don't know your name, I'm sorry. You did mention that a lot of things have been watered down. And my experience is that a lot of things have been watered down from what it used to be. I am 80 years old.
Hallelujah.
And I have gone through the stages of Igbo Akpofo, to Ekwozu, to Ijabuwa. So I've seen them all. One thing we have to know is that there is Igbo culture that we always refer to. But the Igbo culture is also segmented. What applies to some areas does not apply to another area of Igbo land. Though there is generality that you can refer to every now and then. Opera, as you have already described, for the oldest person in the kindred, happen to be the oldest person in my kindred. It's just, the kindred is just beyond just family. On the day that I took the opera show, something occurred to me that my father used to say, Ubo Ejinago, but then we are carrying Ubo. Because I was faced with carrying the Bible on one hand and carrying the Ofo on the other hand. How do you compromise? My father never did, because he didn't have the Bible to worry about. But as a Catholic, I have the Bible to worry about. The question you're gonna ask me is how did I solve the problem?
Yes.
I have been here in this country for over 52 years. So being able to get myself totally diluted into the culture in Nigeria is in Igbo land. It's difficult because I have to marry both the Western culture and my Igbo culture, right? For somebody who asked the question, I just say that what I did in this particular case, the Reverend Father was there, gave me the Bible with a cross. Oyisiala was there to give me the offer, which I very gently handed over to the person who can, in my family, who can service the offer, what offer requires, that I cannot do from America. And I got that idea from our Reverend Father here. Many of you know him, Karamoneke. He is the opera of his kindred, but he is the Reverend Father. I compared with him. I hope people will don't mind all this story, because I know many of you don't know it.
No,
This is very good.
I conferred with him. I said, Reverend Father, you are opera in the area. How do you handle this? He said, yeah, that's the question. I told you exactly what to do. Find somebody in your family that can deputize for you. I did the same. I did that. And I also want to build a monument where that offer will be placed. Where my children and children's children, when they grow up and they hear about offer, they will go to that monument and say, this is offer of my kindred. And I'm advising most of our kindreds, because there are 10 kindreds in my village, in my town. I'm advising all of them that we, the 10 kindreds, build a monument with those offers labeled, so that when the children come, they go there as a museum where the offer is, because it's a symbol of authority in Igbo land, and we cannot do away with it. That's my story.
Thank you. It's almost as if you knew exactly what we were going to talk about next. I mean, thank you for that comment, because one of the things, again, I read this book several times, and one of the things that I kept asking myself is, as a son of Uzinaumu, but also as a first generation born in America, I have to find a way to reconcile a lot of these different things. So we see Shakespeare wrote "What is in a name," and if we could turn to page 184, I'm going to get into some of those conversations now. So just the third sentence in the first paragraph. This section talks about evolution of names and titles in Uzinaumu, and a lot of these titles and names are very similar to ones that we see across Igbo land as well too. It says, a close look at the name given to a child at birth depicts the overall state of mind in his or her parents when the child was born. It reflects the mood of the parents as portrayed in joy, sorrow, abundance, scarcity, dreams deferred or dreams fulfilled, expectation or deprivation, gratitude or ingratitude, loss or gain, success or failure, and other variables. Now, this is something that growing up never really concerned me very much. But as I got older, we started hearing a lot about the circumstances of naming a child. So when it was my own turn to have a child, I looked to my peers as well too. And one of the things that I think transferred over very well in the culture was the practice of naming our children based off the circumstances in our lives and what was going on at that particular time, and also giving glory to God as well too. And I think that within at least my generation, that's a practice that transitioned and translated over well. But in chapter 12, this is the same chapter, in chapter 11, we also talk about all the feel-good titles, age group names. It includes things about as the O organization, Ichekwe, age group distinction, and things like that. I think we're coming to the point of realization that as the early Nigerian immigrants to the U.S. didn't come with the intention to stay, right? And I believe so much of that has colored our experiences and the cultural adoption that we've experienced in the last 40-some years. We're kind of faced with the reality that in order to preserve our culture, we need to actively transplant our culture from our homeland into the diaspora. And we heard about the challenges in doing that a moment ago. So you list out a good amount of these different types of titles and different parts of the culture that exist in Udi and Uzinaumu and Igbo culture. But which of these, if any, from the section do you feel is a good candidate for easy adoption into our current modern climate with the Westernization, Americanization, and also Christianity? What can we do? And when I say we, I mean my generation. Can we do it in part on our younger generations, our youngest generation, to help preserve that culture in the midst of this changing world?
Okay, that's a very good question, and especially when a new generation begin to think like that, because it's a problem that faces us. Most of us came here just 1, 2 years, 3 years you leave. And we come here, come to the point now that we have our kids. And the sons have become fathers. And one thing that is good is that people continue to maintain that type of name, because the name given you at birth is a blessing. It gives you an impression of the temperament or the type of mindset the parents were when you were born. Like a list of number of things, plenty, scarcity, a lot of things. Yeah, but going to your question, the culture in terms of talking about name given at birth. The young people here are doing very well. People are giving names to their kids, reflecting exactly their mindset when the child was born. We hear about so many other things that are just thanking God for one thing or the other, praising God for what God has done. That is fine. I think it will continue like that. The new generation now who answer that name continue to give it to their sons or daughters. It might take a long time before they begin to think otherwise. Give it to them that are really westernized, that doesn't make as much sense. But how can something like also age group, O and Mao, and so many types of entertainment that were used to make people feel good during the time In Igbo land, we have Anuna, Kochi, and Anuna Udukuri. That is the time after the planting and before the harvest. This is the time people entertain. You hear people dancing and talking at that time. Then, most of those things again, if you look at them critically, you find that most of them have been watered down too. In terms of Mao was something that was so fabulous, very fantastic, it's the entertainer of the first degree. But it's no longer now because it's attributed to the magic, so some fetish things. But people did not know that the question of those things I claimed of Mao was supposed to make people fear. Fear over masking it, just losing it. And then they give it that clear that is this and this and this. They can point at something, the things disappear, this and that, to frighten people so that you get away from it and give it the reverence and them. But those things are just dying off. Think about also is another thing that is there. Even Igbo today, in some areas, also has not been very, very much looked upon as it used to be before. I can tell you that some people I know, in my contemporary, who lost elementary education because their father, the soothsayer said their father should do also. If they don't do it, maybe the daughter or child died in infancy, or they have a serious cut on the leg or something. They said, if you don't do it, the case will be dying. And for that reason, they jump into each, this is awesome. And that, because they started with nothing, it impoverished them, and then they have to sacrifice the money for the education. We put it in that. And the kids just lost everything. So, it is here in this place that the people come out and tell that also, but also had not been getting that momentum they had in the past. How do you make it to people in the diaspora to appreciate it and maintain and keep that type of tradition? Is something that is going to be a challenge to people who are also titled men in diaspora. They should organize themselves and then initiate a kind of induction based on this. So that the young people will look at it and say, they can be built children and do that. But in absence of that encouragement, the also now is that if you want to do also, you go to your place, whatever, if you are qualified, you do it and come here and tell your friend, oh, I'm not of this place. And people just give me the recognition. You get us some drink, we drink and say, oh, call you that name because that's the name you want to answer. That name solves all the problems for you. So, in terms of the other, Owu is not something indigenous in our area, the Oru area. So, how do you go to activate that is something that people will just do. But the bottom line that they don't have the support from home because the people are not as energized, as enthusiastic in carrying it out because of intervention, because of religion, because of the westernization.
1 second. So OU is very specific to this community. Can you give a very brief overview of what that is, specifically to those who might not know what that organization or unity is?
OU is a kind of celebration, a festivity that annually celebrated. It's a question of the mask, it's a question of people dancing, and the Christian people invite their relations and friends from anywhere. People move from place to place and join themselves, and then at the end of about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they come to an arena, an open place, and they dance and dance and dance, and a lot of people, so it's just a kind of dance which essentially can attract young people from 8 years or 6 years to any level. And then it's a kind of society. It's not all that, it's not a civil society, but it's sort of a group that, you know, if you are inducted in it, then you have your own name. They give you a name, that name based on what you can do.
And on page 186, you go a little further to say, any male who was applied for and accepted for invitation was expected to satisfy certain conditions of that organization. And once those conditions were met, he would choose an Owu title name.
Okay.
Once initiated, he would be called that adopted name, adopted accolade within the group.
Okay. What it says here is that every young person from the age of 6, their father will just initiate you to, and you give you a chance to dance. And during the old time, people who are not inducted into will always avoid any conflict, because they can, if they beat you on the road, they whip you. And that becomes something that people always avoid, because to avoid being ridiculed and being punished, at the time nobody will challenge you, because the law enforcement is not there. Because the people always think, they found that time your dad will come and initiate you, and then you dance, you give you a right to dance. And dancing is something that energizes you and makes you so excited. And that dancing becomes one of the things that people say that carry it out. So it's a question of incentive. If you don't do it, you have a punishment for that. Or you just belittle, you know, don't feel that you are falling, you fall out of track. So people look at it in that way, that they get you involved in that, and then you have the right to enjoy yourself and free yourself from all this type of humiliation you can get from even your contemporaries who can punish you, and you don't have any right to fight back, because if you fight back, it's a violation by yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
And so young people in this, if they can start something like that, they can, that's fine, because young people are ready to do, like all my grandkids, that if there's something like that, they want to dance, you know, then they can grow up and keep the, yeah, okay.
And one thing that I'm very interested in, oh, one second, I'm coming, is I'm personally, I love hearing these prescriptions from the older generation of how we marry these things together. So we'll dive a little bit more into that and other things, but we do have some small gifts, some small raffles. You saw a couple people came around with some pads. So I'll pass it over to Anyikam now to do the first raffle drawing, and then we'll take questions. Yes, you can announce the raffle.
Can we get the light a bit, or so they were coming around. So real quick, we've been going straight for a while. Do we take a break and then do? Does anybody need to do a Bible break, or do we just jump into it?
I just did it. I just did the Bible.
Okay, because I saw some people leaving out. I just want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah. Let's put the wheel.
All right. So earlier, people were coming around getting names on the tablets. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Let's do this. Can you hear me? All right. So earlier there was, we had members walking around grabbing names from and adding in the tablet. Those names are entered. So now we're going to tap to see who's the first winner.
Wow.
Okay, great. Good. What?
Can you announce the name?
Wow.
I've never won anything.
Before you can accept your prize, you have to say your name and what part of Nigeria you're from, so we can all learn each other a little bit more. Please, can you announce your name and where you're from back home?
Okay, that's exactly. Because my name is Greg Nebolisa. I'm from Ifedunu. Ifedunu is a Dunu local government area of Anambra State. And I'm quite impressed and surprised. I wasn't expecting. I didn't even know there's something like raffle here. I'm grateful.
Thank you so much. But before I leave, I'd like to make a comment or two. I want to thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I believe you had a question as well.
Yes, I do. You want me to go ahead right now?
Of course.
Oh, excellent.
It was destined.
Okay, good. First of all, I'm impressed by my friend Alex Anyikam. We have known each other for so long from St. Albert. And I will never forget the honors that he and his family, his wife particularly, paid us when I had the most troubling event in my life. They were there almost every other day. And I want to let you know publicly now that my family and I are very much appreciative of your kindness. That's why I said, no matter what I'm doing today, I must be here. So, thank you so much. On a lighter mood, before I get in there, I wanted to talk about engineering. The first offer and his wife. Every day I see this man, he looks so fresh and ageless, and his wife. So I'm trying to beg you, is it the food, the water, or the air? Say you are 80, I even look older than you. So please, after this, I would like to make
I think we could do, oh, sorry.
So my question to you is just, in your own town, could you tell us the impact of religion, the westernized aspect of Igbo people in your own town? Why I ask that question, and I want to know whether it's still relevant today. The reason why I ask this is that back in the day, in my town, the white man came. I can remember there was a reverend called Father Don and Father Duncan back then. What they did was, at the point, they assembled all the deities in our town, assembled them in one of our soccer fields, and burned them off. They cemented all the things that made our people who they were. So I was wondering if you had that same impact in the village. And now, recently, our people are beginning to realize that those things that our people used to worship, that they are coming back. So I was wondering what impact the white man's religion brought to your own town. Thank you much.
Dad, before you answer that question, I don't know if these people have looked at my notes. I don't know if we have hackers in here, but these questions are directly related. So I want to expand on that remark a little bit and give you a chance to answer 2 in 1. So in page 155, you go into great detail in the section about supernaturalism, gods, and deities. You recall a story about the Obana River, which is a river in the community that is revered as a deity. And it says you recalled how the Obana deity demanded that the earliest settlers choose one of 2 options: to drink from the Obana without eating the fish, or to eat its fish without drinking the water. These earliest residents chose wisely to drink the river without eating the fish. And that agreement was to keep and avoid untimely death. Previously in the book, you state, on several occasions, these oversized fish chased swimmers out of the water. Severely, these fish bit some of the women and the school children that came to the river to fetch water or to bathe. The infested large fish were believed to be untouchable because they were sacred. Later on, reports of the horror and near-miss stories daily became the cause of great concern to those students who, on a daily basis, crossed the river on the way to and from school. As newly baptized Catholics, these Uzinaumu youths were taught to oppose and challenge all superstitious beliefs that were antithetical to Catholic orthodoxy. With that belief, they decided to demystify that unholy fairy tale as presented by ancient folklore. You go on to say, can you go on to say what happened next in the story?
Okay. Brother Greg, in Igbo land, you say, whatever can happen. And if somebody can translate it to others. So, what you say in Ifitedulu, Emma, so it happens in so many places. But what impact the Christianity had in some cultures is very overwhelming. Okay, the reference is making now is something that somebody from Acadia. We have a similarity because a branch of my town is from Acadia. Okay, just like I told you, the branch of Mbidi in Ogu area is from Mbidi in Imo State. So you make a reference to, because there's certain things, two identical things. There's Obana River in Mbidi, which is Uzinaumu, just in the center of it. And Oras of Okija. If you look into the history of Oras Okija, that type of thing happened. They don't eat the fish, but they drink until on recent time when outsiders came in there and broke that type of linkage. But that linkage is with Uzinaumu today and Mbidi as a whole. Okay, a legend, you know, most of this is talking about because we don't even know where this thing started. But people believe that it's very potent. It can kill you, it can do certain things. So that was a kind of a myth or a legend or a belief system that originated from time immemorial that we inherited. That says that the deity that controls the Obana River, which is the main source of water to my people, until of recent time, people begin to tell borehole and say pollution. Nobody ever thought about pollution in 40s and 50s and 60s. But when people begin to drink borehole water and other things, and Eva water and other things, but they begin to, they don't have much use of that Obana River. But initially, the deity says enter an agreement with the people who were there within that time, that nation. So there are two options. You either kill the fish and eat it and don't drink water, or you drink water and don't kill the fish. The same thing with Okija, with the Orash Okija too. So, but that thing became, the fish will just grow there. In my own time when we were going to school, 54, 55, the fish will, big fish will just come out and block the well. Because there's a passage you have to pass, the water will reach your day, just cross. From there, I will go there every day in school, go there, coming and go there. So the fish will so overgrown like that and come there. Sometimes people go there with chase people like that, bite some people, it become nuisance, become a serious threat. And young people who were baptized that time going to school say, wow, this is getting what? How? They don't believe that because they have been told in catechism that that is the banner has no power. So some people, after certain time, what they did was what they decided one Saturday. I was in school that time, but so they decided one Saturday to go to that Urbana River and they challenge that fish, kill it and carry it and go somewhere. Go to the school we call Amankosi. That is the place, the church, the small church that we had that time. So they went there and killed the fish, and it was an abomination. People couldn't believe that. So wow, how can it be? In my lifetime, this guy is going to kill all of us. They brought this into an open place and some of them stole the pork from their moms and then cooked it. It boiled and they started eating it. Because they said they were newly baptized Christians and that they want to see whether they can kill. The community was so outraged, that was incredible. They couldn't even believe that. All the chief, council of chiefs and elders started them saying, did you see what happened? It was so historic, and people couldn't believe that. And they came there, surrounded them. These guys were eating that. And after that, things never became the same. The elders called these people, and that was the person. One person was the leader that time was Simon Dickens. This happened my presence, so I'm not going to tell you something like that. Simon Dickens was the leader of the youths that time. The innocent Adigwe was his assistant. Because the Uzinaumu that will have three major components. And the other one was Simon, the other one, Uzinaumu. Innocent Adigwe, Uzinaumu, Anyikam. So they were the people. But they rallied some people, they all that did not even know. They said, this they started from their lifetime, from the time immemorial. Nobody ever messed with that fish. Nobody, they complied with that agreement that was entered into. And they wanted to do anything, they wanted to use for the young people were ready to fight. And they said, don't fight for the Urbana. Let Urbana fight for itself.
Hallelujah.
So the thing was so much that after using all force and they mellowed down and they wanted to compromise. The young man stood up and said, why are you fighting for the deity that you believe is stronger than you? Why should you fight for somebody who is stronger than you instead of that person fighting for himself? That Urbana should rise up and fight his fight. Go ahead and say that. If Urbana feels that this thing is under a violation, let him fight us. And he told them that even the fish is as sweet as the Uzinaumu River, which is another river that we fish, but the fish is very small. He said it's even sweeter than that one. And they couldn't even believe. That was incredible. So, at a certain time, they said, okay, if you cannot provide something to appease the gods, the God of this water, can you ever tell us that we made a mistake? They said they didn't make any mistake. They did it because they found that that they want to prove to that. So, finally, what they did was, they said, okay, what they do is to, on their own, so give us something to, they give us contribute something. They said, I don't want to contribute anything. But they will start from that time killing fish in that water. But finally, they came to a compromise. Parents began to, they talk to their sons, and sons really, because they were boys that time. And appeased them and tried to put pressure on them, and they said, okay, since we have made our point, the old man said, look, if you want to do anything, do it in absence. When we are gone. No, but don't do it here because we're going to kill us. They say, well, if you die because you want to die. So finally, what they did was that they went and do the appeasement, and the guys said, okay, just for peace and this and that, they don't want to go to that, but they want to have made their point. And that is one of the things that you can look into in terms of the conflict between the culture and religion, and what was taken as abomination that, to be very frank, up to this time, nobody kills fish in that river, up to this time. Okay? But one funny thing is that this side that is just a part of Mwidi, the other side that is Ozara, to Egwe, to Oguta, the fish there. I don't know the rationale behind it, but that's a culture that we really, if we challenge it, it becomes a problem.
And we've noticed that sometimes, even in Western culture, we don't necessarily have the same ties to the practices we do. It's just part of our community and what we do now. So we may not, the people in the community may not believe the spirituality of the deity, but by practice, they still don't fish there. So, and that's how we see those things get transferred.
Any consequences to the guys?
Huh?
Is it more than any
They
consequences?
did that, they live to the full life.
They enjoy protein. They just enjoy their protein.
Yeah, I mean, I apologize. Yes, sir, I appreciate your concern that the religion of the white man, that is what we say, has impacted most of our cultures. But thank you again for having the privilege and being alive to share these things. As he was asking the question, I actually went to Judges chapter 6. The same story happened in Judges chapter 6. Gideon went out and destroyed the gods in their family house. And the people said, how can you kill our God? The father of Gideon said, Gideon, did you destroy the God? He said, yes. So he turned to his villagers and said, please, let the God fight for himself. And to hear that, we got to hear that in 1950s in Nigeria is impactful for me. If the gods are powerful, let the God fight for himself.
Praise God.
Well,
Praise God.
The small gods. Yes, the deity. If the deities are powerful, let them fight for themselves.
Yes.
And let me not go there. I'm a pastor. Okay, praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
So, but let me come to the question he asked, or his comment, which was very interesting, that he went to St. Petersburg in the library and he found an Igbo book. In 2011, I commissioned a young group of ladies from New Orleans to write a book concerning my own family, my village partially, and my area. And I told them stories of what my father told me. And the young ladies were like, you meant it? Because the story stretched to 1887. So these young women, knowing that I'm an African, although somebody introduced me as a pastor, they wanted to be sure that I'm telling the truth. So they went into a research and they found a book in a library in London. And the title of the book was 25 Years of Missionary Work in Kwaibo River. The book was written when? Who can guess? 1912. So when you subtract 1912 from 1887, that's 25 years. So these young women copied the book, full PDF copy, and sent a copy to me. 222 pages. I read it all night, crying like a baby throughout the night. Why? Because the missionary that started the exploration in Calabar and Oron and Eket area, which some of you may hear of those areas, was a 23, 24-year-old boy. His name was Samuel Beale. So he came into our region and started teaching. So when we said, did they have a good impact on us? Yes, they did. Because my father was not born until 1929. And this is my father guessing when he was born, because his father didn't read, his mother didn't read. So they now went through this process, and that guy's story is now confirming all the things that my father used to try to put together and try to tell me. So essentially, we saw that book and now know that the missionaries truly from 1887, were walking step by step before they brought Igbo Church up to Aba. For almost 50 years. The man died, that man died in 1948 in our own community and was buried there. I know some of you have heard of Mary Slessor. Okay, so these are the kind of people that were helping us. So when we want to talk them down, my grandfather doesn't know when he was born. It's my father alone that says, I guess I was born based on the story in 1929. And he went to primary school at the age of 19, at 1949. And so I now have a story that is put together in a book that can be shared with other people. Some other person may wake up tomorrow morning and research more. But the gods that were our own gods, whoever they were,
Our wives.
the deities, didn't send my father to school. Didn't teach me anything. So I am today standing here because somebody went in and in darkness, they used bicycle, in fact they used foot to enter the forest to go and teach our people. It took the man in the book, he's written, it took him 12 months to be able to win one soul, and the soul he won was an old woman. You know what that means? Who was paying for the bill? It is very critical that we know that whether our gods have been destroyed or deities have been destroyed or not, there were people who sacrificed their lives. That boy left his family in Ireland and spent those 70 years working to rescue us from darkness. Thank you.
We're going to do 2 quick raffles, and then we have a question on this side of the table. Can we spin the wheel again, and then we'll take 2 questions, one here, one on this side of the table, and then we can get into a final round of questions and then open the floor.
All right.
So,
Okay.
we're gonna spin. All right. 2 things real quick.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and spin the wheel. We're not gonna project it. We're just gonna call the name. We're not gonna project it.
Oh, here we go. We are gonna spin the wheel.
All right, can everybody see the wheel?
Yes.
So again, if has anybody come in newly that hadn't put their name in the black tablet? Okay, so we're gonna spin it now.
Emangobu.
And we're sending a copy of the book.
That's good. Come
Well,
on.
you got 2 for 1. You can give one to a friend or.
Yeah, give one to somebody else.
And we'll do another spin. Give it just a second book here. Here we go. And we will spin. Live stream.
Good one. Oh,
Yay.
that's me. That's me.
Live stream. Live stream.
Thank you very, very much.
And you know what? Let's just do another one. Let's do another one. Let's do another one. Let's do another one. Why not?
So what is the prize?
A book. All right, let's do one more. Let's do one more. The theme of this book is giving back, so we're
Where's
giving
the
back.
CNN? Wait, CNN has to
And the last
Thank you.
one for now.
Thank you. Wow.
All right. On the winner, maybe? So this is, we've had some really spirited conversations. We have, say
Comment?
So here's what we're gonna do. In the interest of time, we will, I promise I will get to everyone, okay? We'll take one quick comment here. We'll move on to the next session. After the next section, we're opening the whole floor. So that means we go question to question to question to question, okay? I think we were here first, and then on this side, and then we'll open after that, okay? Okay. But please, in the interest of time, we'll go, okay?
Microphone's on.
Good afternoon.
It's on, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Sebastian.
Put it closer to your
Doctor of Education. Let me start from the fish story. In my village, we have the same thing. Where a stream, for years nobody fished on it, until there's the Biafra War. When the people came, they started fishing on that stream. What happened? The whole fish disappeared. Everything the fish disappeared. The fish gone. On the issue of why we're here today, was one time ago, somebody asked me, Dr. Franklin, so what have you given us? This woman was watching Benjamin Franklin go in and out of the constitutional hall. He said, lady, the public, if you can keep it. Our founding fathers gave us culture, custom. All we have to do is to keep it. And one of the ways to keeping it is what my good friend here, Anyikam, did. Put it down on paper, no matter how imperfect it is. History is like octopus. There are so many prongs, so many legs. You pick it up from wherever you can. So, my good friend, you have started it. I'm also reminded of what Signature said. If he had seen further than any other man, it was because he sat on the shoulders of giants. Now, my good friend, you have provided your shoulders for others that would want to write the second volume, the third volume, and the fourth volume to see the hospitals.
Thank you.
The MC said something about what Shakespeare said. What is it again? Everybody here knows my good friend as once upon a time a student, a father, grandfather, ninth of Chronicles. But most of us here don't know that he was an adjunct professor of history at the Uzinaumu College. I personally recommended that to my dean, and he was offered the position where he taught history for American students. So now he's teaching history to his own people. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
In page 160, now I had an observation to make, where you said that the Archbishop Bell's administration politicized the kingship in Imo State in May. Next vote, please. There was a pathway that revived the issue of the title of issue in Imo State immediately after the war. During the war, that was the pathway revived it. Thank you, sir.
So, we'll take one from the lady, from the mademoiselle here.
Microphone check.
And I think,
good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carol T.K. Orafu. I'm just visiting. I'm visiting from home, from Nigeria. Ordinarily, I'm resident there, and I'm a lawyer by profession. Thank you very much, and for my in-law, because he's married my sister. Thank you for the book. It's quite a contribution, the little I've seen about it and what I've heard. If we all can write about our different little communities, it will be quite nice, because in the end, people will be able to make a general, present something general for the people please. My brother-in-law here has told us a little about his home, that is the house. I can tell you that where I am married in Arushima, the culture is a little bit different. There's a lot of diversity in this Igbo traditions and culture. It is a little bit different, sometimes opposing views. But by and large, it will be good for us to have a common ground from where we can operate and teach our children and generations to come after us. Yes, there's a comment I heard here about the good things missionaries did. I agree with him, actually. But I beg to disagree when he says that it was all good and no bad, because it is not true. It is not true. I am 74 this year, and I know that some of the cultures we had were good. They were good. Some of our customs and traditions were bad. I disagree. And what they brought for us, the missionaries brought for us, I am a fourth generation Catholic, making apologies around it. But to tell me that they did so well for us and we didn't do anything for us, it's not true. It's not. Because in the former Igbo traditions, this extended family system was one of the best things that's happened to us. We were able to take care of the young and the old in the societies. But what we are being taught now is selfishness, self-centeredness. And sometimes they tell us Christianity, you love one another. It's not true, because we do not. Let's not deceive ourselves. I'm sorry, I'm a very good worker person.
You're a lawyer. We understand.
So, I appreciate very much that they made us go to school and that improved us. There's no doubt about that. But some of the things they taught us were not good for us, and they were condemning our culture, which was unnecessary. Because we had some very good cultures before they came. If they had taken the good and left us, if they had taken the bad away from us and left us with the good ones, it would have been fantastic. But taking everything or condemning everything we had, it didn't do us anything. That's my little contribution.
thank you. Again, very astute and very refined comment. I think
one of the things I wanted to make sure that, Jen, one second. Like I said, we'll have maybe 2 small sessions, and the floor will be open. Everyone will get a chance. But we have to move through this one. So please, Chere, go. One of the things that we talked about is yeah. So one of the things that we talked about that is here is we talk about on page 99 and 100. We talked about rites of passages and purity. And I want to read a small section for that, because what you do in this book is you talk about the women in the culture, and you talk about how oftentimes their voices are left out, or how they're pushed to the side. You make mention of the Ikwezi ceremony, which is indigenous to me as a whole, and how it was a ceremony about, I won't read it directly, but I want to kind of get to kind of the core of it. It was a ceremony about how if a woman was found impregnated before this ceremony, she would be banished, but the man would go off scot-free. And you spoke about some of the double standards that are present within that culture, where we're talking about not all of the culture was good, but some of those double standards were bad things. Now, the question that I have to ask is, when we talk about the generational narrative that we've been discussing here for the better part of today, we talk about the narrators and the people that have contributed to this record. We can't help but notice that all of the narrators were all men. And that all of the narrators were all men, and how that is a little bit telling of the source of the material. We started this conversation off by talking about the credibility of the narrators, their ties to their spirituality, and how that serves as the foundation for the accuracy of this record. But how do you think, well, before I get to that, in the book you also discuss how Igbo culture was balanced, whereas the women had their organizations, the men had their organizations, and it was more balanced until the introduction of those warrant chief systems and things that kind of helped skew the power towards just the men. You make mention of how that system was broken up by the women in what was famously known as the Women's War. But how do you think the narrative, or this narrative, would have been enriched if the narrators had also included women's voices and the stories and vantage points from them directly?
Okay. Okay. Hello. Am I on?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. All the time, this book has much references to outstanding performance of some women, directly or indirectly. When you talk about the rite of passage that is typical of Mudi as a whole, including Uzinaumu, that has been a very, very big inheritance from the ancestors that were very, very strict against what I can refer to young people or teenagers or under teenagers failing to marry and essentially you have out of wedlock marriage or pregnancy without fulfilling the tradition that classified for passage, rite of passage. They believe that before a lady gets pregnant, he has to undergo what we call the fat room, which is a process whereby she undergoes before she gets married. And any type of pregnancy before that has a very harsh punishment. And that had been there, but one thing that the Civil War brought about was moderation of that harsh policy. Okay. During the war, when everywhere was cut off from Nigeria, from the Biafra at that time, people who were children who were out in Nigeria or overseas who could not even come in to physically perform that ceremony of rite of passage posed a very serious problem. So it was modified at that time that you can do it in absentia. And because of church involved in things and because of modernity, so it is now watered down. Let me use the word watered down because I've been using, let me continue using that. Watered down to make it easier for parents to perform that as soon as they can a sign that that lady has had her first period. Okay, put it that way. So once they have that in their, whether it's there or not, they just go ahead and perform that based on the excuse that it was done during the war and it could be extended after the war. So, but women also played very, very important role. I'll give you an example of people where somebody forcefully imposed a kind of seizing and searching and seizing some property without authorization, without warrant of search warrant. And give you an example of another time that the family that age group, some women have a very serious crisis in between because of election process, whereby some young people intervene. So all along they have played a very important role, but the role they are playing because Nigeria is a chauvinistic society that does not even, and it's just like almost every society, but here in the United States it's the same. The only thing that people are just moving in now, changing very much. So women have played very important role, but at the same time, there's more room for them in terms of equality of men and women, which is really very, very good, but if it is practical. So those are the basic things that you can, women have played a important role in that. And if you go along the way, you can see various stages where they contribute one way or the other all along. And they have not been taken for granted. Even though in prehistoric time, they were only seen and never beheld. So that's
women have always been second class citizens.
Yeah.
And you know, and the I'm sorry, I don't have permission to talk.
Yeah. Well, who has the mic? Who has the mic?
Oh, clever, I was right back to you.
No, like I said, women have always been second class citizens, and they have to force themselves to become. And that's what we have all gone through. And the missionaries coming, That's one of the positive things they did. Give equal opportunity to everybody. But they did some really bad things to our culture. Thankfully, this book will give us a menu, give us a chance to take some of the things, to try and practice some of the things that are in the book. For example, when my children were 2 and 4, no, 4 and 6, we went to Nigeria. And my son, the older one, was used to giving her everything she wanted. And then we got home, she realized that whenever something is brought, our culture is the youngest one gets to share. But then there is an advantage. When you share, you take a little piece of it, but that's your own, but how do you say it? And that is very safe, I mean, not only safe, but you don't have to worry about who is older and who is younger. Everybody, they knew their place. And they don't have to go to court to find that out. And you start practicing this from birth. And we don't need anybody. And another thing is that the chairs, when you are in a chair, you are not supposed to tell a lie. Of course, now that's different because they're taking money and selling themselves. But if we can bring all those things back, we do not need a prison. We will not need a prison. We do not have to spend money in prison because as they grow up, they now start to live that. Like I said, it made a big difference in my 2 children when they were younger. Because that girl got everything she wanted. But when she came back, she was a different girl and had more respect for her older brother. And there are many other instances in your book, I'm sure, because I haven't read it really, but that can let us practice those things. And if you start early enough and you believe it, my goodness, we'll have our culture back and we'll live peacefully.
Good. Amen.
Good. Thank you. We have one more topic we want to talk about. If you can get it ready, if you can get it ready, we can do this as I'm talking.
Okay.
So there's one more issue I want to bring up and focus on in the book before we open it up to general questions. So let me see what section this is. And this is because we've been kind of talking about this a lot, right? In chapter 11, we've discussed previously those feel-good titles, but there's a section in this book on page 109. And 109 in chapter 9, the name of the chapter is From Warrant Chief to Kingship. And as I read this chapter, I'm reminded of a lot of the changes I see, a lot of the present state of what I see in our culture, what's visible from what I see. And this talks about the genesis of a lot of those things, a lot of those changing of our traditional practices through this warrant chief system. On page 109, that leads into 110 all the way to 112, but I'll read certain excerpts of it. It says, "It is important to restate here that the warrant chief system never existed in Uzinaumu before the end of Ngudi Amawka War in 1902. Amawka is just the neighboring town of Ngudi. The warrant chief was an invention of the colonial mindset that had no semblance to the Obinato traditional representative democracy. Warrant chiefs were forcibly employed and aggressively imposed on victims without the consent of Obinato communities. That self-serving title empowered their holders to collect taxes and other sources of revenues and remit them to the colonial treasurer. The invention and introduction of the warrant chief system indirectly empowered warrant chiefs in all areas where they were imposed to do whatever they liked within their domain, as long as it enriched their pockets and that of their colonial masters. Rewarded and upgraded tax collectors to the highest status of traditional leadership in all Oru communities. With such unprecedented elevation, they became traditional kings of the community, and without the consent of their community. Surprisingly, each king crowned himself without the consent and empowerment of his community or kingmaker, a position that never existed in pre-1902 Uzinaumu history. Now, culture is defined as the way we live, the way of life of a people. And we talked about how culture is organic and how it somehow kind of spreads, but your book claims that these titles, these king titles, are actually not of the culture, but from outside influences. However, we look all around us in our communities, and we see many people hold these titles. So how do you reconcile this paradox with people of my generation and younger who may read these historical accounts but see something different in practice?
Okay. Let me make sure. Okay. What you see here is the fact, because this warrant chief system didn't come to my place as a surprise. You know, there was a very outstanding development in terms of war and peace. You read about that it says here that it's important to restate here that the warrant chief system never existed in Uzinaumu before the end of Uzinaumu War in 1902. Uzinaumu War was fought in May 28 to 30th, 1902. And it was after this that assembled all the people in the Uru, and the south of Uru, assembled them in a place you called Umwe, that's the Mbachumwe. And then it was there that they entered into an armistice, a sort of peace treaty. And in that peace treaty, at the end of it, it was there they selected a number of people from in that area, and they made them, they saw them as warrant chief. A warrant chief that time was not designed to be the leadership position, just a tax collector. He was supposed to collect tax and give the money to the colonial office. They selected people who were really rough, who could even enforce that and use all possible means, force or no force, to collect the money and to share it. If you go to people, the history of warrant chief, it tell you that the origin was done 1902. But with time, this warrant chief system continued serving the master at the expense of the people. And the excess was too much in 1929, during the, 1929 noted for what they call women, something call it Abarayo, some call it women riot. It was that time that in that area, they said the excesses of the warrant chief, and they banished it, they banned it. But this continued until 1976, during the Dasuku Edict, during one of the military leaders, whereby they go ahead and say, well, let's tell all these people's government, because they don't have a central government, let's tell it to reflect what happens in the West, where you have Obas, and the North, where you have MS. So through the edict, they brought about, they rejuvenated almost the dead warrant chief system. And those people came up like that and were very, very happy, took it over. And then in 1981, then under the governor of Imo State also elevated it to chief. Then under this Denwan's administration, it hijacked it now to SL. But one thing that is very clear is that the warrant chief system constituted originally was not designed to be a forceful leadership, because there are some areas where the leaders are based on natural selection of a community. But these people, the warrant chief system was based on who can even carry out forcefully to collect as much money from people. So that began to create a lot of things. And that also has much to do in terms of red cap. If you look at the genesis of red cap, you find that the red cap have three groups of people, three qualifiers of red cap originally before it becomes what it is now. The first one was that if by natural selection you are 70 years, you are entitled to wear the red cap. Because God has given you that based on natural selection. God have endowed you with cap. When you are 75, you can put an eagle, the eagle feather on your left-hand side of the cap. And when you are 80, you can put it on the other side. That is a prehistoric time when these things were done. It's not nowadays that any small child who can buy the red cap can put it on her. Okay? So, those are some basic things that you can look and see that this book will give you much. This book will also tell you about Igbo, who are the Igbo, and who are Uzinaumu, based on the concept of our people. Which is the Uzinaumu now? The last time that people talk about the Uzinaumu nation, which people are agitating for that, which is a different thing today. So there are a lot of things here that we can look into, and this book covers, because the book is probably research, and then a lot of things. It may not perfect, it may not be absolutely perfect, but it has to mirror certain things that is resonant of them, relate to your own community, one way or the other.
So let me ask you a follow-up question on that. Whereas, again, we see the kingship as part of our modern culture, where it was something that was introduced from the outside. Is it your preference that with time that those practices fade away out of prominence, and we go back to kind of this kingless society as we've been enjoyed for centuries, or is it too late for that? And do we work on trying to reappropriate those titles into something that's more culturally relevant and a throwback to how it previously was?
One thing we have to note is that once you get somebody a title, or you give somebody a title, or possibly give him a paper that calls certificate, it's never very, very, even if you take it ever from him, he will still hang it and claim that. In some society, for example, my own society, the people who are running this, there are separation of the warrant chief and who is the oldest, who is the prince, or who is the obara of the place. There are two different things. The only way, one family that has that warrant chief system was installed, that warrant chief system had it as a hereditary position. And but the obara or the community leader is something that based on natural selection. There are two different things. This is hereditary. Whether you are a small, that when you are the oldest in that line, you can be the warrant chief. But some areas integrate this thing to be the same. So it's going to be very difficult to go ahead and withdraw and then make it such a way that go back exactly what it was before 1902.
To try to restore that.
It will be very difficult to restore. And whoever handles that title or that will do everything they do to fight to maintain it. And it will be a bloodbath. It will not be encouraging to do that, but unless something happens. There are some communities that are part of the Medina that the warrant chief resigned because he was a Jehovah's Witness, and somebody else picked it up. So it could be that, but if somebody to voluntarily relieve that, he will say it's inherited something from his lineage, and he will go to fight for it, whether he has meaning or not. But because he feels the challenge his own inheritance, because the warrant chief was given to individuals to carry out a certain mandate, collect money from this, use force and this, and give us our own share. And some of them enrich themselves with that.
So we shared a lot of good conversation. I'm sure we can talk all day on these things. What I want to do now is I want to give some I want to give people time to get up, stretch, bio break. If you have to leave, then give the chance to do that as well. So I know there's a lot of people with questions, comments that they want to do. We want to take a short break right now for a book signing. So if that, you can sit here. You have your pen.
Yeah.
We can sign. And if people want to make a comment, we can comment at the same time as well too. Then you know who these ones are for. So with that, we'll just we'll open the floor up. If you have a book that needs to be signed, you can bring it up. We can get that signed. If you have a message that you want to put on the book, you can ask what the message you want to be is as well too. If you have a comment, you can raise your hand and someone will come by with a microphone to help out. Okay.
What's the order of signing?
Oh, just we can come from this side here and then go around. So if you have one, just come up. It's fine. We form a line. We get your microphone. 1 second. We have someone who wants to make a comment.
Just a comment, please. Again, when I asked my question the first, I forgot to give to acknowledge the author. And I'm going to use expression by Emerson. The poet, he said, if I'm recognized as a poet by the act of God or of the devil, I must also be a poet by virtue of knowledge and effort. It takes knowledge to write a book. The knowledge of writing itself. You can't just start writing anything because your opinion. And of course, it takes effort, serious effort. So, Anyikam, you have exhibited both knowledge and effort to put this in writing. Another comment is that those of us here also, we now know that if you want to write an Igbo code about Igbo culture or tradition, you better do your research. This has raised a lot of questions. So somebody said, I wish I had time to read this book before I come here. Anyikam, I don't even think you first. The question would have been enormous. Trust me. Trust me. But I also commend you. On page 184, as the moderator said, you spoke about, or you wrote about naming, what it means. I think I have evidence of that. That naming a child really reflects parents' mood, aspirations. As a teacher, I was in the class one day, 11th grade class. After the end of the class, students were walking out. I called one day, come here. I said, what part of Igbo are you from? He looked at me. He said, I'm from Abia State. I said, have you been to Nigeria before? He said, yeah, when I was a little baby. I said, to your brothers or your sisters, I said, are they able to pronounce your name? He said, I don't have brother or sister. I'm the only son. I got emotional because the parents named this child Chiazabem Eberem. Chiazabem Eberem. I said, ask your mom what this name means. The only child. So, if there's no truth in this book, that alone reflects the truth. The way that therefore, thank you very much.
There may be people who don't know what that name means. For those people, can you elaborate on the meaning of that
Okay, I
name?
think where I was here. Chief Azagom Eberem. My God has answered my prayers. I've been wanting child. I've been praying for a child. And here comes this one. My God has answered my prayers. That's what it is.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else have comments, questions that we want to ask?
Mine is a comment.
Okay.
Brief comment.
I know I will read the book. I know that anytime I have comments, I can reach Alex and ask him. My comment is that we need to, I know that our tradition is changing and is eroding gradually and gradually and gradually. If you're from Nigeria, you know it's true. Even speaking Igbo or whatever is changing. Number two is that from what we said here today, I still would like us to continue with rite of passage. That every male child must go through that rite of passage to be a man. To be a man is not easy. So they need to learn how to be a man. And number three is that talk about rivers. Talk about rivers, fish, rivers. Many of you know about Imo River. Many of us here know about very big river called Imo River. Imo River lost its prestige when I was in school. It lost its prestige because, back in those days, people would do sacrifices on the street, on the road to Imo River. We named all kinds of cloths. Miranda, what we call Miranda. Miranda is a kind of drink that was popular in Nigeria. Miranda, Coke, sugar, all kinds of things were laid out going to Imo River. Guess what happened to those? We had a student by name Magnus. Magnus went there and collected all of them and sold clothes with them. He ate all the chicken. He ate all the fowls. He will cook them in buckets. He will stay and eat it. He didn't die. Magnus ate all the things that were sacrificed to him already. Every day, brand new cock. Every day, brand new cock. I'll be not scared of him, to be honest with you. But guess what? Magnus left school feeling good. Went grade 1 and went, I don't know where he is today, but very smart. So that defeated the notion of river and fish. If you give me that fish or move it now, I will eat 10 of them. So I know it's not going to do anything. So when we look at these things, another thing I want to comment here is somebody from Arashubu, she has left. Listen, I went to a conference in Virginia. Arashubu, I went to a conference in Virginia where they told me, hey, let's go to Virginia Museum. And you know Arashubu is a very bad place. I don't know who's from there. Arashubu has a history of slavery. Don't even go there and talk about slavery in Virginia. You'll be in trouble. Because they know Arachuku. Are you from Arachuku? No, hell no. I'll be honest with you. So if you're from Arachuku, don't go to Virginia and say, I'm from Arachuku, I'm the proud of it. Don't do that. I'm giving you an example. They were about to attack professors who came from Arachuku simply because of the history of Arachuku. Thank you.
For your information, please, this book writes extensively in terms of Ibini Oba Page. You read that because the eyewitness account of somebody who went there, the process of judgment, the judgment. When you have a problem in those days, you go to them, they will tell you the truth. Then they use that. So that was very, very important.
So
One thing I do want to say real quick before you comment. So this is a book launch. If I get everyone's attention, one more second, please. This book is not available right now for purchase online because you all are the first ones to have it. Tomorrow, the book will be able to be purchased on Amazon.com or at Uzinaumu.com. You are the ones that came here, that gave us your time, that gave us your ears, that gave us your kind words. You are the ones that we want to go back out into our community and tell about this book. Tell 3 friends, 5 friends, 10, WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok for those that are hip, right? We'll provide a link. It's very important that you sign up on the sign-in sheets. So we'll provide you a link and we'll arm you with whatever you need to go ahead and push this out to your social media, to your WhatsApp group, and tell people about the contents that you've seen in this book, the conversations you've had, and the impact that this can have to us understanding and documenting our past, if not just in this small community, but for our own villages where we're from. So please, let's not let the conversation we had here stay within these walls. Let's talk and let's tell people to go to Amazon.com. Let's tell people to purchase, to read, to discuss. As you said earlier, the purpose was to write this to spark that interest, right? So please, let's do that as well too, okay? We can do another drawing. We have one big raffle. It's the big prize. It's the grand prize.
Really?
Right?
Yeah, you did well.
There's 2 left or 1 left? Is there 2 left or 1 left?
There was 1 bag and then books.
Okay, all right, we'll do 3. We'll do 3. We'll do 3 and then we'll go 1 big one, okay?
So, are we doing these first?
Yes, we're doing those first. All right, let's spin that wheel.
We need sound effects.
Gary. Oh, Carol DK Okafor.
Okay, you can write.
Oh.
She just left, so you can
Oh,
just
the
write.
lady that spoke over there.
Yeah, you just write it.
Oh,
You
wonderful.
don't have to be present to win.
Wonderful. All right.
You can say we.
Reserve her presence. Yeah, presence.
Just write it in.
have to be present to win.
She just left at the very end because
Okay, my sister, okay.
no, well, in actuality, we ran a little over. So, and she stayed the whole time. So, if someone come in for 1 minute and leave, they don't get a prize. They stayed, they contributed, they can get their prize. So the next one.
Thank you.
Clever.
Next one.
Tell right.
Ooh.
Oh.
Just spin again. Just spin again. You can spin again.
Now we have one per family.
One per family.
Same family.
Yo, take it over. I'm chilling.
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Okay. I talked to the judges, and they said that is legit.
Okay. That is good with me.
So now we're down to the grand prize.
Wow.
Hold on. How about you said that she has more prizes?
Okay, so we're back to the grand prize right now.
$1 million.
Okay?
Catch.
So,
You don't want to
sound effects.
No, it's messing up the photography.
Whoa.
From
That's
Moko. Who is that?
Pastor's wife.
Oh, okay. Wonderful.
Okay.
The grand prize.
The floor is yours.
Yes. I wanted to talk about where's the mic?
The mic?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know he's busy. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'll do that.
Again, a nice opportunity to be at a grand book signing ceremony. You have made a very nice comment about Arachu. Yes, and I think it's on. Okay. Yeah, about Arachu and that stigma, it still rings along, even up to the present time. And in fact, where I come from Newe, you know. Okay, and I know that some part of Ogu has a link with our people, and up to the present, they do not intermarry. For whatever the reasons, okay. And even here in Houston, I witnessed, you know, a case in point where somebody wanted to marry and they said, oh, it doesn't matter, oh, we're in diaspora. Oh, they told him, no, go and ask again. And they thought it was a joke. They started initiating the marriage. And then after a while, it didn't work. And they had to go back to the books. So some of these things are not without circumstances, you know. We cannot neglect our culture. Our culture is as good as any other culture that we might admire. There's nothing wrong with our culture. We have to love it, we have to respect it, and we have to pass it on. One thing that I know about the Igbo culture that is probably dying out is the use of proverbs in talking. And we know that in the villages, if you really sit among the elderly ones, they don't talk much. One word, they say a lot of things. They give you a proverb. They give you one proverb. And if you don't understand it, you're completely lost. So, how I wish that apart from the difficulty we have in teaching our kids the Igbo language, how I wish we can go back to that practice of using proverbs. And by that I mean help ourselves to identify ourselves, because if you use proverbs to talk to an Igbo person, then of course you'll be in a position to say certain things other people may not, you know, that is not palatable to other people, but your own culture, because they will understand you. And if they don't understand you, they may think different from exactly the message you want to relay. But if they are Igbos, if they are true Igbos, and they understand the proverb, then there wouldn't be, you know, conflicts or in accepting what you're saying. So I thank Sir Anyikam for this work. Like our brother said, it has generated a lot of interest. I remember in those days, that was in the early 80s, I wanted to start to write the history of my town before our first senator, Chief NBC Chukwubike, did write the first volume of the history of my town. And that has stood the test of time. And everybody who attempted to do anything will make reference to this. So I think that this work, if for no other thing, it has excited interest amongst us here, and we will put it, you know, continue to advertise it so that it will be a point of reference for future work. Thank you again, Sir Anyikam.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's open comment questions. Oh,
I got one.
There's a question. We have one question. Oh. We had one question come in from online. One of the sons of Moody asked a question. Let's see if I can grab it here. There it goes. Can you shine some light on the origination of the different autonomous communities in Moody? Good question. It's a good question. One second.
Origin?
Origin. There's a, yeah. Got it. We had a question from online. It says, can you shine some light on the origination? Oh, you know, we'll wait until afterwards, so he's not doing two things at one time.
Yeah.
But that's the question that's coming up.
Origin. Okay.
Hey, thanks for coming.
I was talking about those photographs that I took when you people were at the Kyiv. And I saw your sister the other time.
The house is
I know.
This is yesterday. Maybe at the end when she starts moving. Man, hi. We got anybody home with baby? If you have anybody, how old is baby?
Maybe 3 months.